Hey, folks. If you can hear us, feel free to drop a little comment in the chat. So we are live on YouTube and on X. Oh, I did a mistake here. We're supposed to be live on Instagram as well, but
I can't figure that out, Rami. I've tried it myself. So best that we leave that for now and try to fix it later.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so this is sorry, Dimitri, I feel like I haven't done a live stream in like 2 months maybe, or was it? I don't know. Been a while.
Too long, young brother. Way too long.
But basically, Dimitri, since end of August, I've been in France. I took like a few weeks break from journalism just to explore France a bit, but then I got back on my feet and I landed some insane interviews that we will be publishing soon, maybe on this channel, maybe on a French version of Reason to Resist.
Well, we are actually, just so you all know, we are going to launch a French version of Reason to Resist. It's not, we have to figure out where we're going to put Rami's crazy interviews, but they were in the French language with prominent people from France.
So we're franchising, right, Dimitri? We're franchising into French.
I guess so, but for resistance purposes, we're
for resistance purposes, right? So I was able to land an interview with the notorious and in some way legendary French Cameroonian comedian Dieudonné, who has an ankle monitor. He's basically being criminalized by the state for doing funny jokes. And so I was able to land an interview with him, and that was quite exciting. We should be publishing this. We should be publishing this quite soon. I saw the first draft of the editing, and it looks pretty good, despite some microphone issues, camera issues. The result seems pretty fine. And while I was interviewing Dieudonné, I received an email with the lawyer of Carlos the Jackal, Carlos Ilich Ramirez, the PFLP member who basically was part of the resistance in Jordan and Lebanon, who did the OPEC bombings in Vienna, among many other attacks in France. He's currently doing 3 life sentences in Paris, in prison. I was able to land an interview with his lawyer, Maître Francis Villemain, and that was an insane interview. It lasted maybe 2-3 hours. We're going to have to trim it down a bit. But such an interesting person. And then I went to say,
who are some of the other people he represented, Rami?
He represented Maurice Papon, who was the Secretary General of the Gironde Prefecture, which is basically Bordeaux, back in the 1940s during Nazi occupation. And he was tried in the 1990s for collaborating with the occupation and for deporting Jews and resistance fighters to concentration camps. And it was a heavily politicized trial, and Maître Francis Villemain in some way won the case, in a sense where Maurice Papon didn't die in prison. He was sentenced to, I think, 10 years, but after less than 2 years, he was released for health reasons. And he, for people in Quebec or France or Switzerland, they might know the case of L'Ordre du Temple Solaire, which was like a collective suicide as part of a cult, and he defended the victims of the Ordre du Temple Solaire. Among many others, he has a nice book called La Robe et l'Épée, The Robe and the Sword, that you guys can go pick up, or you can watch the interview that I did with him. He seemed to be pretty impressed with the thorough research that I did about his cases.
Yeah. So just so you know, everybody, we do believe in the principle that of due process, and we made a decision to interview this very well-known lawyer, some would say notorious lawyer, to understand why he had represented these people and what his overall philosophy was of criminal defense work and so forth. I myself have not had an opportunity to watch either of these interviews that Rami did, but based on what he's shared with me, they sound fascinating. I'll be looking, especially as a lawyer, I'll be interested to hear from this well-known French advocate why he chose the career path that he did. And Dieudonné, by the way, this comedian who has been censored at 6 Ways from Sunday by the French state, actually performed in Montreal a few years ago. I think he was here as part of the comedy festival. And I watched him perform in Montreal, and he was well received. But in later years, Dieudonné became a prime target of the Zionist lobby in France. And he has made controversial remarks, no question about it. And Rami explored that with him. So I look forward to watching the interview and getting our French language channel launched. But in the interim, we are going to focus today on the subject of Palestine. Before we proceed, Rami, do you have any other thoughts or comments about our French channel, your experiences in France, the interviews you did?
Well, there's a couple more. I mean, I feel like Paris in some way is well, in the francophone world, Paris is really like the hub, right? Unlike in English, where there's London, New York, Washington, San Francisco in some way. Well, it's all spread out across the world. Pretty much everything happening in the French-speaking world is represented in some way in Paris. So the opportunity to land interviews with many interesting people, all within the radius of, I don't know, like 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, is actually impressive. So I could see myself staying here for much longer. Also, there's direct flights to Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Algeria. I'm trying to find my way to an Algerian embassy or consulate. Today I did some phone calls. Hopefully I could land a visa to go there and explore the great revolutions happening in the Sahel region. What else? I'm trying to find access to the catacombs, the underground tunnel network in Paris. And it reminds me a lot about Palestine. And I believe that there could be some research or some reports done from there and see if it has any revolutionary roots or any revolutions can come out of there, since we know this is where the Palestinians and the Vietnamese have found a lot of hope out of.
Lord knows that France needs a revolution. So another one. So with that, let's launch into our first subject today. And by the way, Rami has a hard stop in 45 minutes. So unfortunately, we're not going to have too much time for the live stream today. But we're going to start with our Palestine update. And I thought I should take a moment before I get into the details of what's transpired over the past week to sort of explain why we're doing these Palestine updates. And it is our position that the genocide is by no means over, not by a long shot. And as Alia Abunima of Electronic Intifada has said so eloquently, Israel has simply rebranded its genocide as a ceasefire. And yes, there has been a dramatic reduction in Israel's daily slaughter of Palestinians. We're going to talk about that today. And there has been a substantial increase in the delivery of humanitarian aid going into Gaza, which was virtually nil before this so-called ceasefire. But the daily killings continue. The level of humanitarian aid is grossly inadequate to end the famine or to restore the health of the Palestinian population. There has been no reconstruction, and approximately 2 million Palestinians are barely surviving today in what is a toxic wasteland, and their health is deteriorating every day. And just based on what we know about the human body and its ability to endure these kinds of hardships, the deterioration is likely to be accelerating in a large segment of the Palestinian population's health. Now, in my opinion, Israel, with the full complicity of Western regimes and Western corporate media, has undertaken this rebranding for basically two reasons. One, support for Israel in the West was plummeting and continues to plummet. And two, Israel's army is now a train wreck and desperately needed to end or at least suspend its ground operations in the Gaza Strip to try to recuperate. On Reason to Resist, we are deeply concerned that this rebranding will cause people in the West to relax the pressure they were placing on their elected officials to act. So we're determined to keep a spotlight on this genocide and to remind our audience routinely that it is ongoing, not only in Gaza, but also in the occupied West Bank, and arguably beyond the borders of Palestine, in South Lebanon and Syria, and in Yemen. So let's begin by looking at the Gaza casualty figures for November 1st to 5th. We did our last report at the very end of October, our last update. So we're focusing on the first 5 days of November in this live stream. And Rami, if you could pull up the casualty chart. There it is, thank you. You will see these are numbers based on the reports of the Gaza Health Ministry, which historically has been quite conservative in estimating casualties. And they show from November 1st, 5 Palestinians were killed in Gaza, 9 wounded. The second, 3 killed, 6 wounded. The third, 2 killed, 0 wounded. The fourth, 3 killed, 7 wounded. The fifth, 3 killed and 2 wounded. The total over those 5 days is 16 killed, 24 wounded. That's an average per day of 3.2 killed and almost 5 Palestinians wounded. So there has not been a day since this ceasefire purportedly came into effect on October 11th when Israel has not murdered and wounded Palestinian civilians. And the last 5 days have been no exception. Now, let's look at the Gaza Health Ministry update, the most recent one, which was from yesterday. And you can see in the second last paragraph, it says, since the ceasefire, October 11, 2025, the total number killed was 241, and the total injuries, 609. So that works out to an average of 10 killed per day since the ceasefire began, which is much higher than the average for the past 5 days, and 24 wounded per day, which again is much higher than the average for the past 5 days. And we want to show you, because it's important that people see what this actually means to human beings on the ground. If you could pull up the video of the injured. This child was wounded within the past 5 days in the Gaza Strip in an attack which injured 3 civilians at a wedding in Gaza City. The occupation forces fired upon the wedding party. Fortunately, no one was killed, but as I said, 3 were injured, including this child.
I mean, Dimitri, have we heard any condemnations in the West of these killings, right? You're mentioning 3 people a day. It really feels like Israel was given a permission by the West, by NATO, by France, by Canada, by the United States to carry on. I mean, you use the word ceasefire under the words of Ali Abounim of the Electronic Intifada, but it feels like a protracted genocide seems to be possibly a better word. I mean, we gave permission to Israel to keep attacking Lebanon after the ceasefire, and we're seeing like a rinse and repeat over here. They found a perfect sweet spot from a political standpoint where they can keep killing Arabs and not Palestinians, and not have any form of accountability from the West. It seems like the story of Palestine has been turned the page in the Western audience. We're not hearing any more condemnations from Canada, from the United States. Oh, the United States, we never saw them anyways. And we knew it was all empty words in Canada and the UK. But now we're not hearing anything at all. And the video that you just showed us, Dimitri, I feel like it's no different than anything we've seen in the past over the last 2-3 years.
I agree with all of that, Rami. This is, from the West perspective and Israel's perspective, this is a propaganda exercise. That's not the perspective of the resistance and the Palestinian people. They are going to continue to demand that Israel comply with its commitments, although it's flooded them every day. But I think you're absolutely right. I think that Western governments are trying to sweep this under the rug. They're trying to rebrand this as a ceasefire when it's really just an ongoing genocide. The way I put it is that we've gone from genocide plus to genocide light. And they want you to forget what is being done to the Palestinian people. But we must not forget, and we must not relax for one moment, the pressure on these murderous psychopaths
And while the Palestinians are honoring the ceasefire, going through all the rubble to find the bodies of the prisoners that Israel ended up killing themselves, right? Let's remember that if there are dead prisoners in Palestine today, it's because Israel bombed them, right? They killed their own population that were imprisoned in Palestine. And Israel is not carrying its side of the agreement. There's still only 1/3 of the aid that was supposed to be agreed upon actually entering the Gaza Strip. There's still the murder. I mean, they're killing Palestinians as we speak. Palestinian hostages, right? The ones that were in Israeli prisons and Israeli torture chambers are being released, tied and bounded with marks of torture, still handcuffed. So, I mean, truly, this is a despicable ceasefire. I mean, I don't know how anyone in the West could ever call it a ceasefire.
Me neither, Rami, but I think we learned during the course of this genocide that these people are capable of anything. And this is just one more confirmation of that. During the 25-day period from the official start date of the ceasefire, October 11th, Israel has not reported a single civilian death at the hands of the resistance in Gaza, nor has it reported any attacks by the Gaza resistance on civilian targets in Israel. It has reported that 3 of its soldiers, who are really just terrorists in uniform, they were killed in the Gaza Strip since October 11th. But first of all, Hamas denies involvement in those killings. I have no way of confirming whether that is true. But given that Israel has every day since the ceasefire purportedly went into effect killed Palestinian civilians, and given the illegality of the occupation, because whatever that ceasefire agreement says, and as the International Court of Justice ruled last year, Israel is an occupier of Gaza, and the occupation of Gaza and the West Bank are illegal. So based on that, those facts, the resistance would have had every justification for attacking the occupying terrorists. So whether or not they did in fact do it is kind of beside the point, because Israel gave them all the justification they could possibly need for taking on, for physically opposing the presence of those terrorists on the soil of Gaza. And Rami mentioned, Israel continues to violate its humanitarian obligations under the ceasefire agreement. Rami, if you could pull up image 4, we could show what the data actually are. So the government media office in Gaza issued this report a couple of days ago. The occupation is deliberately obstructing aid entry into Gaza. From October 10th to 31st, only 3,203 trucks, 639 commercial, 2,564 aid entered, averaging 145 daily, which is 24% of the agreed 600 daily quota. Fuel compliance is 10%, so they delivered only 10% of the fuel they're obliged to deliver, the Israelis, with only 115 fuel trucks entering out of 1,100 expected. And so we can see that in a situation where there was already famine within Gaza, and the health of the Palestinian people there is unquestionably deteriorating in this toxic wasteland whose medical system has been completely devastated by the genocidal Israeli military. You know, the refusal to allow anywhere close to the minimum required to sustain the population, 600, is in and of itself a continuation of the genocide. Even if you exclude the people who are being killed and maimed by Israel's munitions, it's still a genocide because of the famine and because of the deteriorating health of the population, which is a completely Israel-made humanitarian catastrophe. So that is the situation with respect to humanitarian aid. On November 1st, the Gaza government media office disclosed more information. I'm sorry, this was on October 30th, that 71,000 tons of unexploded bombs are present in the streets of Gaza. All neighborhoods in Gaza contain unexploded bombs, they said, threatening the lives of civilians. Quote, "We need experts and specialists to deal with the unexploded bombs and rockets scattered in the streets of Gaza." Now, what has the resistance done to honor its obligations? Rami mentioned the delivery of the bodies of prisoners of war who were in all likelihood slain by Israel's relentless bombardment. If you could pull up image 5, Rami, we'll see this is an article from today's Times of Israel, which says that there are 6 slain hostages, as they call them, whose bodies are still held in Gaza. So the vast majority have been turned over. And in my opinion, the fact that they've been able to turn them over in circumstances where the entire Gaza Strip is devastated, and these bodies have been lying in the rubble for weeks, if not months, and the bombing of Gaza continues sporadically. The fact that they've been able to deliver as many of these bodies as they have is, I think, a testimony to how hard the resistance groups in Gaza are trying to maintain their end of the bargain. At the end of the day here, what we're talking about is the bodies of slain hostages. They're not alive anymore. They can't be saved. So any suggestion that delays in the delivery of their bodies to Israel somehow justifies the killing of people who are alive, civilians who are alive, is just downright deranged and demented. Truly, only a sick human being would make that argument.
And Dimitri, it's also important to mention that there's heavy equipment missing to remove the rubble, to retrieve the bodies, right? And the resistance in Gaza have called on Israel to allow heavy machinery to enter the Gaza Strip, and it seems that this request has been denied. So we need to ask ourselves who really wants the bodies to be returned, right? Does Israel want this to I mean, Israel probably wants to sabotage the transition to the second phase of the ceasefire, right? Which would lead to the reconstruction, to an even bigger opening, even bigger opening of the borders, an entry of humanitarian aid, reconstruction, maybe a restriction of the buffer zone, right? Because there's a yellow line right now that's pretty much cutting half of Gaza Strip. So it really feels like Israel has no intention to move beyond the first phase of the ceasefire.
Yeah, and so without that heavy equipment, again, it's just remarkable they've been able to deliver as many bodies of slain captives as they have. So now let's turn to the occupied West Bank, because as we've said from the outset here on Reason to Resist, this genocide is not confined to the Gaza Strip. It was simply being conducted at a lower level of intensity in the West Bank. And now one could make the argument that the intensity of the genocide in the West Bank is even higher than it is in the Gaza Strip. But, it certainly is on a comparable level. So why don't we show image 6, Rami? This is one of the many Palestinians who were attacked by these crazed settlers who are aided and abetted by the Israeli military. His name was Hikmat Shtuei, from Kafr Kadum, east of Kalkia. He's in intensive care after a brutal assault by Zionist settlers. They beat him severely, threw him into his vehicle, and set it on fire. Yes, beating him severely wasn't sufficient. They then had to set his vehicle on fire. His injuries included a skull fracture, brain hemorrhage, 6 broken ribs, and multiple other fractures. And this is we don't have the time to be exhaustive here in identifying all of the victims of these crazed racist settlers in the past week or so. Let's now show, Rami, if we can, image number 6. This is a child who was shot dead in the West Bank, the occupied West Bank, within the past several days. And one of many children who has been killed. The child's name is Murad Fauzi Abu Safin. He's 15. He ascended to martyrdom after he was shot by Israel genocide forces, not by settlers, but by the genocide forces during an incursion into Al Yamoun, west of Jenin. And just for good measure, the genocide forces abducted his body. And then if we could show image 8, Rami. Here is another victim in the West Bank. Ahmad Rabhi Atrash, 35, was identified as the martyr that ascended after being shot by Zionist settlers north of Al-Khalil. Again, this was just within the past several days. And finally, if we could pull up image or video number 9, Rami. And this has been a very common scene We're still getting, there we go.
Uh,
Try that again. So what you're seeing there is an olive grove on fire in the town of Rumana. This is west of Jenin, and it was caused by incendiary bombs fired by Israel's genocide forces, not by settlers. So you can see that, again, the Israeli military and the settlers work hand in glove to dispossess Palestinians of their land and terrorize them. Now, Israel also continued to expand aggressively its criminal West Bank settlements. If you could pull up image 10, Rami. Thank you. And in a press statement, Hamas said that the occupation had approved 1,973 new settlement units in the West Bank, following the approval of 1,300 units in the Gush Etzion. Hamas states this represents a dangerous escalation of Zionist settlement policy and a blatant violation of international law. That is unquestionably true, as the UN General Assembly and the UN Security Council and countless human rights experts and the vast majority of governments around the world have said over and over again, these settlements are a violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention. Let's recall that, Donald Trump put on a big show a few weeks ago about, so did J.D. Vance, about preventing the Knesset from formally annexing the West Bank. But as you can see, for all practical purposes, Israel is annexing the West Bank and is dispossessing Palestinians. So the Trump regime is doing nothing more than trying to maintain an illusion, the two-state delusion. Really, it's not illusion; it's a delusion at this stage, because decades of Western government support for the settlement enterprise has rendered the creation of a sovereign Palestinian state on the occupied West Bank a practical impossibility. And if that weren't enough, Israel also continues to kidnap civilian hostages in the West Bank. Here is a statement from the Prisoners Media Committee in Occupied Palestine. The occupation arrested, they say, 540 Palestinians in the West Bank and Al-Quds, that's Jerusalem, during the month of October. The detainees include 8 women and 39 children. So in every conceivable way, the project of ethnic cleansing and genocide proceeds apace in the occupied West Bank. Now, as all of this was going on and the Western media was doing its utmost to ignore it and to fraudulently characterize what is going on in occupied Palestine as a ceasefire, Israeli society descended into a new low of depravity. And if you could pull up image 12, Rami, you'll see this is an article from Al Jazeera a couple of days ago. Israeli authorities arrested an ex-army lawyer on the allegation that that lawyer leaked a video showing Israeli terrorists raping a Palestinian detainee. And so rather than, condemn and punish to the full force of the law, such as it is, the perpetrators of this rape, the authorities have decided to focus their ire on this lawyer, who, by the way, is no champion of human rights. She has lots of Palestinian blood on her hands, but for whatever reason, she saw fit to leak this particularly appalling video, and now they've thrown her in jail. So, and we've seen that there were protests. These crazed Israeli racists were protesting the fact that people were talking about holding accountable the Israeli soldiers who perpetrated this rape.
What I find quite curious is how Netanyahu has been complaining about how this leak from the lawyer is the harshest blow to Israeli PR in its history. Do you think he's trying to clearly it isn't. I mean, there's a genocide of at least 150,000 people killed in Gaza. If that's not the worst PR blow to their genocidal state, I don't know what is. But do you think he's using this case to distract any responsibility on maybe like the decaying Israeli image in the West on this rogue lawyer?
Indirectly, yes, Rami. I think what he's doing is what his whole regime is doing is sending a very menacing message to anybody in the Israeli law enforcement community or the military who are talking about leaking, evidence of Israeli crimes. And the message is, even if you're a military lawyer, you're going to go to jail. We will destroy your life if you reveal evidence of the most heinous crimes. And of course, by sending that message, Netanyahu is seeking to perpetuate the impunity of Israel's military, and that will only make it more sadistic and destructive in his treatment of the Palestinian people. So I'm glad you focused on that, Rami, because it just says it all about, the Israeli political elite. Rather than focus on the heinous crime that was documented in this video, Netanyahu is complaining about the severe public relations attack on Israel, as if Israel has any reputation left to save. Now, while we're on the subject of sexual assault, Israel and Western corporate media have published in the last couple of days the account of a former male prisoner of war held in Gaza who claims to have been sexually assaulted while in custody. And if you could pull up image 13, Rami, thank you. Oh, that's the one. And you'll see the name of this former detainee is Ram Braslovsky. He claims that he was sexually assaulted. Those are the words he used, and was tortured. And the reports of this are accompanied by video of Braslovsky speaking about what he claims to have endured in captivity. And I watched the video. I don't know if there is a full video, but what I watched, it looked to have been edited. And he was asked for the details of the sexual assault. And all he was prepared to say was that he was made to stand naked. And at times he was beaten while he was naked. He doesn't actually come out and describe the kinds of acts that we know Israelis, because we've seen the videos, have committed against Palestinian detainees. And it may be, to be fair to him, and he talked about how difficult it is for him to explain what he endured. Maybe he just can't talk about it in any detail. That's a possibility. But if you actually watch the video, the only thing he describes, which could fairly be described as a sexual assault, is that he was made to strip naked, and while standing there were times when he was beaten without clothing on. So in the course of describing what happened to him, he said this. He said that not even the Nazis would do to the Jews what I endured. We've seen videos of Israel doing to Palestinians things that are far worse than what Braslovsky described. So implicitly, I'm sure this wasn't his intention, he seems to be saying that what Israel is doing to Palestinian detainees is even worse than what the Nazis did to the Jewish people. I personally don't draw comparisons between the two. All I know is what is being done to the Palestinian people, what we have witnessed, is the worst imaginable behavior towards an oppressed population. I don't really care to draw comparisons between the Holocaust and this. What I do know is that anybody who engages in this sort of behavior should spend the rest of their lives in jail and should be treated by our governments as arch criminals who merit the harshest punishment under the law in accordance with due process. That's all I know. And whether or not, Palestinians, whether or not Israeli detainees suffered anything near what the Palestinians have suffered remains to be proven. And at the end of the day as well, I will say it again, the violence of the oppressed is not the same thing as the violence of the oppressor. It's possible to condemn them both, but the oppressor's violence is substantially more culpable than the violence of the oppressed, because the oppressed are reacting. They're reacting to what is being done to them, and sometimes they react in ways that is unlawful, criminal, condemnable, but at the end of the day, it is a reaction to their own suffering. So I certainly don't put them on the same category as what Israel is doing to the Palestinians, whatever the facts here may be.
And before condemning the resistance, I would condemn the entire Western world that allowed this to happen as well.
100%, Rami. They are the ones who are ultimately responsible for this. The first people in line to be convicted by The Hague should be the leaders of the major Western governments. Let Netanyahu come after. They've been jailed for life. In any case, a pox in all their houses. The last thing I want to talk about before we turn it over to the next subject, Rami, if you could just pull up image 14. Apparently, this is reported by the military media, a resistance channel on Telegram. Apparently, the Israeli National Security Institute did a poll, and it showed an absolute majority of Israeli public supports an agreement to end the war in Gaza, 76% in favor, 11% opposed, and 13% responded with an I don't know. And it's noteworthy that a majority of the ruling coalition's voters support the agreement, 57%. So even the ruling coalition, compared to 91% among opposition voters. Now, I just want to say, what exactly does that mean, end the war, in the minds of these Israelis, who the vast majority of whom are racist to the core towards Palestinians? I think probably what that means is they don't want the ground offensive to continue in Gaza because their army is a train wreck and they're tired of sustaining casualties and the cost to their economy is too great. But do they have a problem with Israel continuing to bomb and starve Palestinians? I doubt it. I doubt that's what they mean by ending the war. I think they're talking about, putting their own uniformed terrorists at risk on the ground. But at the end of the day, we'll see.
Under the eyes of the Palestinians, we've been under occupation, under war over the last 77 years. And I believe these Israelis, for their minds, right, they're just at war for the last 2 years, and they cannot handle the reactions that they're getting in the West. But for them, there's no occupation, right? The occupation is not a form of war for them. What's going on in the West Bank, the daily killings of Palestinians, the restrictions of the blockade on Gaza. I think they want to go back to their protracted genocide, right? The genocide that lets them sleep better at night.
Yeah. I just want to remind people, as you caused me to think of this important fact, Rami. In the summer of 2014, during what was up until that point in time Israel's deadliest assault on Gaza to date, Israel killed more civilians in that murderous rampage than it claims Palestinians killed on October 7th. Far more. The number of Palestinian civilians they claim were killed by Palestinian militants on October 7th, and we know that a great many of them were killed by the implementation of the Hannibal Directive. But the number that they claim were killed was about 800. In the summer of 2014, Israel killed 550 Palestinian children. 550 Palestinian children. And if you add in the civilians, the women, the adult women and men who were killed, it's well in excess of the number of civilians that Israel claims to have lost on October 7th. And they say, over and over again, we heard this is the worst, atrocity that the Jewish people have suffered since the Holocaust. Whether or not that's technically accurate, it isn't anywhere close to being the worst atrocity that the Palestinian people suffered at the hands of Israel in the post-World War II period. Not even close. And yet we have been told in the West that we should be constantly mourning the loss of, Israeli civilians on October 7th, whereas no mention is made of the far greater number of Palestinian civilians who died under Israel's relentless assaults on Gaza prior to that time. So with that, we should turn to
one thing, though, we forgot to mention is that Steve Witkoff announced that today another country would be joining the Abraham Accords, right? So this is in some way like a little reward Israel gets for genocide, well, for its protracted genocide and the genocide that happened. There's speculation that it's either Kazakhstan or I've heard on Twitter as well, maybe Somaliland. So we'll see how that goes.
So yeah, there's an article on this is The Hill. And it says Trump to add Kazakhstan to the Abraham Accords with Israel. That's interesting. I think, those of us who follow events in that part of the world probably concluded long ago that Kazakhstan's government, it's really a brutal government, like all those supported by the United States and other Western countries in the Muslim and Arab world. But it's been an abject vassal of Washington for many years. Is this going to change the complexion of what's happening in West Asia? I really doubt it, Rami. I mean, what's your reaction? Kazakhstan is not exactly a central player in the politics of West Asia.
It's not, but it has a fairly large border with China. It's one of the key players in the Belt and Road Initiative. It's also kind of the in some way regional leader along the Central Asian states, right? It has relatively good ties with Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. It could be a bigger push for America in Central Asia, and also to counter China and its access to to European markets through the Belt and Road Initiative. So this is what I mean. I also read an article that Kazakhstan had a mining agreement, rare earth minerals agreement with the United States. So, I mean, I think any expansion of American power or projection of American power in the world is a net negative. But I still have hope that, the Palestinians have been abandoned by pretty much all the Muslim countries other than Yemen and Iran and the south of Lebanon. So
there's an interesting comment from Mush8308. Kazakhstan has full diplomatic ties since 1990s. Their leadership are secular traders. I assume that Mush is referring to diplomatic ties with Israel. So I don't know whether that's the case. I'm happy to assume that that's true. That's correct. If that is in fact correct, then what is being announced today is just basically...
Well, it's momentum for the Abraham Accords because it has been stagnating a bit, but also they're talking about deeper collaboration and stronger investments between Israel, Kazakhstan, and the United States.
Right.
So
now another comment before we move on to Mamdani, Terry Love Senegal says, we're all becoming seriously ill, feeling so powerless. The atrocities committed against Palestinians, so abominable, it's literally wounding our hearts. That evil entity must be stopped. If we unquestionably share your sentiments, but I don't personally feel powerless. I think that we are, the Palestinians first and foremost, but those who support them as well, are making great headway, although it's not happening quickly enough. And I think the fact that there has been a dramatic reduction in the level of killing in the Gaza Strip, and there has been a significant increase in the delivery of humanitarian aid, even though we aren't anywhere near where we need to get, and there hasn't been accountability. They are feeling pressure, and the key is to outlast them, to maintain that pressure and escalate that pressure, and not allow ourselves to become discouraged. The whole reason why I'm going through this exercise of talking about what's happened in occupied Palestine for the last 5 days is so that people don't become complacent, so that they maintain the pressure on Western governments.
Dimitri, we're at a critical point right now where the pro-Palestinian movement could either slow down or accelerate and escalate the organizing. We've shown that there's a fracture point in the West. We've shown that they crack under pressure when we put too much. Now's the time to go stronger, right? So, I mean, I think it's in the advantage of Israel for people to think to feel powerless, and we should do the actual opposite, right? So, first of all, the movement is growing. We see the resistance being more and more empowered, and this ties in a bit with the whole Zohran Mamdani thing, where Zionism and the United States needs to rebrand itself, and they're taking these pawns, right, to distract ourselves from the channels and avenues that are actually working. The resistance shut down the Red Sea, showing that Israel cannot really survive, or the West can't really survive without freedom of navigation in the Red Sea, right? They've shown that the south of Lebanon can clear around 20-30% of the north of Palestine, and creating like a permanent issue if they can keep up with the front, right? And they were able to keep up with the war between Hezbollah and Israel lasted around a year or so, right? So so the thing is that there's many ways Israel can there's many like Achilles heels, right? Little fracture points, and now's the time to accelerate our activism, and that's why when I interviewed the reason why I interviewed Maître Francis Villemain, is because at a certain part in history, right, the 1970s, the conflict, the war was not singly in Palestine, right? It was exported across the world, and we've shown that the every consequence, all the hate, all the bombs, all the destruction in Palestine will have repercussions across the world, and it requires us to know our history and know that there's a price to pay for the West for the crimes they've committed.
Right. So let's talk before you go, Rami, because I know you have a hard stop in like 7 minutes. I did a report yesterday in which I talked about the victory of Zohran Mamdani in New York in the mayoral contest. I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about this in the time remaining to us. What do you make of Mamdani? And what do you think his victory signifies?
Well, the first thing I want to say, Dimitri, is that whenever you think you're changing the system from within, you should ask yourself if it's not you that is changing instead, right? So I've been part of student unions. I've been part of these organizations where I thought I was doing good things. And what I realized is that when I focused on Palestine is truly where we have the most impact. So, I mean, I remember growing up watching Obama's campaign, thinking this was the greatest moment in history, you know, was it like 2008 or so? And we all fell into that trap. And I think that was the only trap I fell into being younger. And then we saw Bernie Sanders, and I immediately knew that, no, this is probably not going to turn out too good. You learn your lessons. Bernie Sanders took him, what, like 2 years before saying the slightest condemnation, well, at least using the words that the Palestinians were using, right? He never called it a genocide until the very, very end. AOC voted to hand out weapons to Israel, right? And was acting like a victim while people were protesting and calling her out. So I don't have any hope in Zohran Mamdani because the track record shows that whenever these people think they're going to change the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party changes them. And that's kind of how it works when you show openness to collaborate with Western institutions. And this is not exclusive to Zohran Mamdani. We've seen the BDS movement, right? That has been basically been used to target other Palestinian groups. The BDS movement as an organization led by Omar Barghouti is calling out the BDS organizations here in Canada and other countries simply for standing with the Palestinian prisoners. And that's because the West has ways to keep control over organizations, either through grants, through reputational risk, through promotions and job promises. And this is why I think there's obvious ways Zohran Mamdani, if he's not already compromised, might be in the future. But I also don't want to get distracted into spending too much time on Zohran Mamdani, because the reality is that there are strong movements happening right now in the global South that we should be focused on. Zohran Mamdani is not going to liberate Palestine. The Democratic Party is not going to liberate Palestine. The Americans are not going to liberate Palestine. Who's going to liberate Palestine, Dimitri? And we need to keep our eyes on the prize. Are the people that identify with the Palestinian cause and that are part of the Palestinian people. The south of Lebanon paid the ultimate price in fighting this war, right? And when we went to the south of Lebanon, Dimitri, they didn't surrender. As we went to Kfar Kilam, one day after it was liberated, and we saw flags of Hezbollah everywhere, right? So I don't want to get too much into that, the whole debate, whether Zohran Mamdani is bad or not. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. What matters the most, Dimitri, is that we stay focused. There's so many great things happening in the world. NATO's weapon supplies have been basically emptied right before the war in Ukraine started. Around that time, you had revolutions happening in Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and I can't wait to go there. Iran stood up with a nice fight with Israel, showing that they can be targeted, hitting their nuclear facilities. Basically, I mean, we saw the heavy damage that Israel took. So the reality, Dimitri, is that if you have hope in Zohran Mamdani, the problem is not with Zohran. The problem is probably with you for putting your hope in the wrong places. The resistance is where we put our hope in. And they've shown that they're uncompromisable, right? Mm-hmm. The resistance in Gaza, Dimitri, have shown courage that no one else could ever show. They tried to show humiliating footage of Yahia Sinwar, Dimitri, but when we look at it, it's just shows the kind of character that the Palestinian people have. And that's not exclusive to the Palestinian people. The people in Yemen have shown that as well. The people in Iran have shown it. The people in south of Lebanon. So I don't want to spend too much time on Zohran because I don't think it's worthy of that. What we need to stay focused on at all times is remember that it's only through the resistance of the global south that the global south will liberate themselves. And if he wants to open bodegas that are state owned or whatever, that's good for the Americans. But that's not really where I put my enthusiasm in.
Can't argue with anything you said, Rami. Even if Mamdani is everything we want him to be, at the end of the day, he's just the mayor of New York, and his power to impact the distribution of power in this world, and particularly what's being done to the Palestinian people, is minimal. So he could be the most well-intentioned and determined politician in the United States today, fighting for the Palestinian cause, but the office he now will occupy does not confer upon him the power to make a meaningful difference in the lives of Palestinians. So I think you're absolutely right to point to the things we should be focused upon. I will say this, though, and I'm curious to know your thoughts. It still is amazing that somebody who's openly critical of Israel and who went so far as to say, yeah, we would arrest Netanyahu if he steps foot in New York City, managed to become the mayor of New York. To me, the most important thing about this election is what it says about the dramatic changes in the American political climate. What do you think about that, Rami?
Well, the thing is that what it shows the most, though, is that a message around Palestine can gain you support, right? And I mean, I think maybe Jeremy Corbyn the timing was a bit wrong. But at the end of the day, I mean, he said he was going to cut spending on police in the United States, and then New York, went back on it and said he's not funding to the NYPD. So I think, there's an expression by, was it Margaret Thatcher, who said, if you're 20 and not a communist, you don't have a heart, and if you're 30 and still a communist, you don't have a brain. I think he's somewhere in that transition until he reaches his Margaret Thatcher moment. So I think, first of all, Netanyahu will probably go to New York City because the UN headquarters are there, or the UN General Assembly is there. And that will be a test for him, right? He'll quickly notice that. I mean, he'll find an excuse. The Americans, Trump said he was going to put up a fight with that. Maybe in practice, he's going to show some teeth. But at the end of the day, I think America has an amazing way of always reinventing itself, right? I mean, they've never paid any price for the crimes they've committed. They were able to ban Russia after 2 days of war in Ukraine. Yet after, 2002, the war in Iraq, 2003, we're now 22 years later. No one has paid a single price. What's his name? Dick Cheney died yesterday. Probably had like a awful deathbed, knowing he killed over 3 million people. But the harsh reality, Dimitri, is that America could always reinvent itself until it can't. And that's why we need to weaken it economically to the point where there's a massive drain of people going elsewhere. And that's where I have more hope, is because, capitalism has its ways of putting money into people, buying their support, reinventing themselves. And I always cringe when people think they could change the system from within, because the system ends up changing you.
Right. So Rami, you are now beyond your hard stop. Do you have time for a few questions? You can stick around.
I have to meet someone in 30 minutes, and I'm at by the way, I'm in the communist suburb of Paris called Ile-Saint-Denis. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's sister city with Nabi Saleh, where Ahed Tamimi is from. And every time I walk on that bridge, I see Nabi Saleh Palestinian flag. It's amazing.
That's right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But I have to leave, Dimitri, but you could stay.
Okay. Please do what you got to do. And looks like I can continue. So I would like, I'm willing to, take some more questions from people. Now I'm going to start by, I've seen a couple of people in the chat have been commenting about suggesting that I'm virtue signaling by denouncing atrocities committed by Hamas. Anything that happens, this is from Stupidity Censor, nice name. Anything that happens when offending oneself cannot be categorized as an atrocity. Well, look, man, I'd be the last person whom most Israel supporters would characterize as a virtue signaler. I've taken a lot of heat for my outspoken support of the Palestinian resistance, but at the same time, I believe in, maybe it's naive of me, I believe in international law and human rights and the laws of war, and I think we should try to uphold them. And although I readily accept that a lot of the claims that have been made by Hamas are either fabricated, for example, the beheaded babies, the systemic rape, or they are unsubstantiated, or they're hyperbolic. There is significant evidence that Palestinian militants on October 7th did kill some unarmed civilians. And although, as I said, I don't put the violence of the oppressed in the same category as the violence of the oppressor, I oppose that. I don't think that's virtue signaling. I don't want us to descend into, a situation of unrestrained violence. So I don't put people in the same category, even though on one side they have endured horrible suffering at the hands of the other. But I do think we should stand up for the principle that unarmed civilians should not be targeted with violence. So I don't think that makes me a virtue signaler, but I respect the opinions of those who say otherwise. So do we have any other questions or comments that people would like me to address before we sign off today? Unfortunately, I've lost my comrade, so I'm trying to handle this this myself. So matching male or matching mole, thank you for your question. Do you think the U.S. and its Zionist military base, well put, that's what it is. It's the U.S. Zionist military base, will be foolish enough to strike Iran again? They're certainly capable of it, but I'm beginning to wonder. I was absolutely convinced they were going to do it, and sometime in the next year. But apparently, there have been reports that Vladimir Putin had a conversation with Netanyahu in which he more or less read him the riot act and signaled that Russia was taking steps to help Iran to defend itself. So I'm not so sure anymore, but just based upon history, matching mole, I'd have to say that the overwhelming likelihood is that at some point, yes, the Zionist military base of Washington will be stupid enough to strike Iran again. And that may be the final death blow to the Zionist entity. We shall see. So looking down the list, thank you very much, Terry Love Senegal, for your kind remark. Then someone asked, Ana Fernandez 225, how can someone say Hamas, Hamas, Hamas when a genocide is going on? Certainly, Anna, that's not me. I don't buy into that at all. In fact, I just debated a Zionist on Jamal Thomas's program, in which I condemned him or criticized him for doing just that, for constantly trying to put the emphasis on Hamas. And in fact, Hamas is just like a code word that they use for all Palestinian resistance groups. Anybody who puts up any kind of resistance against the oppressor in Palestine, even when the violence targets only Israeli military personnel who are legitimate targets, they will call that terrorism. They will call that evil. I can't condemn that strongly enough. The Palestinian people have a right to resist, take up arms against their oppressor, whether it's armed civilians like the settlers, whether it's uniformed terrorists like the members of the Israeli military. That is their legal and moral right. And I will defend that right on their behalf until the cows come home. Now, Sweetie 906, thank you for cleaning Dan Lasar's clock. You're welcome. It was enjoyable. I hope to be able to continue that clock cleaning at some point in the future. And I don't see any other questions at this time. So I think we're going to call it a day today, everybody. And thank you very much for joining us on Reason to Resist. We will be turning in the couple of weeks ahead to another site of horror in the region of West Asia and the surrounding area, and that is the atrocities in Sudan. We've been asked by a number of our audience members to delve into the subject of what is happening to Sudan. We think that's an excellent suggestion. It is a subject that's not nearly covered enough in the corporate media, and we've been so focused on the Palestine genocide that we haven't paid enough attention to that important subject. So we've arranged to have a couple of guests come on to Reason to Resist in the next week to 2 weeks who have a great deal of knowledge about this subject of what's happening in Sudan. In the interim, thank you very much for joining us today, and we look forward to our next live stream and interacting with you. Peace out.